Alright, so I've been playing almost exclusively Dragapult since the beginning of the season. I've only played one tournament, or I think one locals and one challenge on Zoroark. Other than that, it has just been Dragapult, and because of that, I have a lot of experience in the deck, and I think right now it is very well positioned. In fact, I'm going to be playing this deck even more because I'm preparing for a tournament in the future called Aichi Champions League over in Japan, and I'm going to be playing probably Dragapult. It is the deck that I'm most comfortable on, and I think the deck that I am probably the best at right now. So, why would I tell you to play Dragapult? Well, I think Dragapult is a deck that can beat any deck in the format. I don't think Gardevoir is as bad of a matchup as people make it out to be, because every time I've tested with some really good Gardevoir players, I have usually come out on top. I might lose some games here and there, but 90% of the time, if we take the overall matches played, I will be the one on top. And that's because this deck is just really, really aggressive. And against decks like Stage 2 decks that need time to set up, you can punish that because you can slow them down in the beginning of the game, and then you can take them out before they even are able to set up a Gardevoir. That's not to say you can't beat them if they do set up a Gardevoir. So, Dragapult EX is a deck that scales in power because obviously in the early game you will be hiding behind your Badoo while you try and establish multiple Draw Cloaks to draw cards, and also Dusclops. Dusclops is a very important card in this deck. I would say it's even more important than the Dusk Noir just because of how flexible this card is and how much use you can actually get out of that 50 damage. And honestly, giving up a price card is really good, and we'll get to that later. For now, let's just talk about the skeleton of this deck. So, Dragapult is a deck that has, I guess, kind of been solved-ish. However, since the meta is ever-changing, the deck will always change, because I feel like the idea of the deck doesn't change, but the counts of stuff will change. For example, jamming towers might change, Turo might change, the supports might change, more counter catchers or more bosses might change. So that's kind of like what it feels like right now. Another like point of debate would be if Monkey Dory is good right now or if Monkey Dory is bad. Right now, I don't think Monkey Dory is needed, but I could definitely see an argument for Monkey Dory being played in the future. So today we're going to be talking about just the skeleton, or in the beginning we're going to be talking about the skeleton. So this is basically what every Dragapult deck does play. And if you guys are wondering which version of the deck we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about Dragapult Dusk Noir mainly. Let's begin here. So we're usually playing a 4-4-3 or 2 count of Dragapult. Honestly, this usually depends, but right now I've been enjoying the 4-4-3 count because it just lets you get a little bit more aggressive in the early game, because a lot of the times you'll have to find that Dragapult, and usually you want to Ultra Ball for stuff like Aidra Cloak to draw more cards rather than have to Ultra Ball for the Dragapult. So you kind of want to draw into the Dragapult naturally, which is just a lot nicer and a lot easier when you play 3 instead of 2. And obviously prizing one Dragapult can definitely be a problem if you're playing 2 Dragapults, because usually your night stretches will be committed to stuff like your Dusclops or your Dusk Noir or your Badoo in the early game if you want to reuse your Badoo or just use it more than once. So the 3 count, I would say right now, is a little bit better. As for the Duskulls, right now the Duskull line that most people are playing is a 2-2-1 split. A 2 Duskull, 2 Dusclops, and 1 Dusk Noir. That is kind of the universally accepted, that is difficult to say for me, universally accepted split. There has been some people playing a 3-2-1 line, but I think a 2-2-1 line right now is perfectly fine, because in a lot of matchups, just having 1 is enough, especially to shut them down in the early game, and then it gives you time to re-establish. But just having 2 is also really nice, and you'll find yourself in a lot of games benching 2 because it's just such a strong card. And sure, Psyduck is a powerful card in the format right now. It's just Dragapult, it's not like warranted to play Psyduck just for Dragapult, especially when it doesn't even fix the matchup that much. It's not like a Drapion into Mew kind of thing, you know, like you wouldn't put it down and just one-shot a Dragapult or one-shot a Mew VMAX. So Psyduck does help, but it's definitely not as amazing as people make it out to be with a counter, because it is very easy to kill when you just, let's say you boss up a 1 prizer, then you can bench Horlucha, which every Dragapult deck does play. You put 10 damage onto that Psyduck, and you take 2 prizes there. And if they reestablish, that you can just kind of reuse this entire thing of just being able to knock out a Psyduck. Not only that, if you put 6 damage counters onto the Psyduck and you don't kill it, on the following turn, you can use Horlucha, put 10 damage onto that Psyduck, knock it out, and then have access to your Dusk Noir lines. So the Dusk Noir lines are great because, one, I would say the Dusk Noir lines are great for 2 reasons. So the first reason would be the shutting down the game in the beginning. For example, against stage 2 decks, usually what you'll do is you'll try and prevent them from getting into the stage 2s by slowing down the game using your Badoo, and then once you are more so established and you have a Dragapult active, then you will use your Dusclops to pop into something like a Curlier, use your counter catcher into a different Curlier, and then you'll knock them both out in the same turn. And then the second great use case of these is late game, like board wiping. Like for example, if they have something like a Mew EX in play, you can pop a Dusknoir into the Mew EX, Phantom Dive something in the active, and put the residual damage counters into the Mew EX, taking a knockout there. And then I guess like a third, a little bit lesser used version, but it's like, I guess it's a little bit more of a different idea than these two, would be more so kind of giving your opponents prizes, so then you can force them into like an Iono to 1. Like you'll pop a Dusknoir, you'll pop a Dusclops, even if they're on 3 prize cards, you'll Iono them to 1, jamming tower, counter catcher, and just go from there. Usually this play will be used against something like a Dengo, where you kind of need to have like back-to-back turns of Phantom Dive without them being able to knock you out, and without them being able to heal and use something like a Toro, and that's why the jamming tower plus Iono plus Dusknoir play is very useful. So that is basically the skeleton. However, let's take a look at a deck list. So right now, this is a fairly common deck list and a pretty standard deck list. So we are playing 3 Rare Candy, and this is more so my personal preference. And instead of playing 1 Hilda and 1 Brock, I am playing 2 Hilda, because Hilda and Rare Candy is just such a strong combination. If you have both of them in the same hand, you can use your Hilda to grab your Neo Upper Energy and your Dragapult at the same time, and then you can use Rare Candy to get a Dreepy into a Dragapult, manually attach your Neo Upper Energy, and have something like a turn 2 Dragapult established. And against decks that require a few turns to set up, maybe attach energy, maybe evolve, this can just shut them out of the game completely. Right? It is very, very strong. So Hilda plus Rare Candy is a very strong combo, and just upping the counts of these cards is a really good idea. Obviously, in the coming format, we will be having Dawn, and Dawn is a very strong card as well, being able to grab a Dreepy, Tricloak, and Dragapult, because it can grab a basic Stage 1 and a Stage 2, and for this deck, that'll be really important because of how important it is to be searching out Pokemon on almost every single turn. In the beginning of the game, what you'll usually be searching for is your Badoos, your Duskulls, your Dreepies. In the middle stages of the game, you'll be trying to get your Tricloaks, your Dusclops, and then at the mid to late stages of the game, it'll be the evolutions such as the Dragapult, Dusknoir, and Pheasantipity and stuff like that. So Pokemon Search is just always a great thing in this deck. Right now, I have kind of cut down to 1 Jamming Tower because you only really need 1 turn of Jamming Tower against a lot of decks. And it'll be more so paired with something like an Iono. The thing is with this deck is that it is a very combo heavy deck. A lot of the times you need multiple pieces during your turn. That is why it is very important to establish the Tricloaks. You might be thinking it's counterintuitive playing 3 Rare Candy and also 4 Tricloaks. That's because the 3 Rare Candy synergizes really well with the Dusknoir and the Night Stretcher combo. For example, if we have 2 Duskulls on the bench and we have 2 Rare Candies in hand and we have an Ultra Ball, we can grab ourselves a Dusknoir. We can then Rare Candy the Dusknoir straight into a Duskull, we can pop it, we can Night Stretcher back for the Dusknoir, Rare Candy into another Duskull, becoming a Dusknoir, and then pop it again, and we have just been able to do 260 damage, and just sometimes you can just board wipe completely. This happened, I'll give you a quick example, against Gardevoir yesterday, where my opponent, I had 4 prize cards left, my opponent had 3 prize cards left, and I was able to set up a board wipe that turn. He had a Screamtail in active with 60 damage on it, and no Bravery Charm. Oh, wait, no, it did have a Bravery Charm, sorry. That's why Jamming Tower was really important. And then he had a Mew EX and also a Gardevoir EX on the bench. So what I was able to do was, in that same turn, I was able to Dusknoir the Gardevoir EX, I was able to Dusknoir the Mew EX, and I was able to knock out all 3 Pokemon in the exact same turn because of Hawlucha. I was able to ping the Screamtail, put it down to 20 HP left, ping the Mew, put it down to 40 HP left, paired with the Dusknoir, and KO and take all 5 prizes that I needed to win the game in the exact same turn. And that is something that this deck is really strong with. You can combo stuff together and just win out of like nowhere. This is something that we saw. I'm not too sure if you guys were watching the recent regional. I think it was Alberto Conti versus Julius Sprinfeld, where Gardevoir was in a good position. However, Dragapult found a way to take all 6 prize cards in a single turn, winning the game on the spot. And that is something that your opponents have to play around, because Dragapult is just such a lethal deck if they're able to get a few Phantom Dives in unchecked. In fact, if you're able to Phantom Dive twice without your opponent being able to respond, you've probably won the game by that point. So other little things are the Pheasantipity is there to draw the cards, because it is very nice to be able to just draw 3 cards when your Badoo dies, especially in the early game, because it helps you establish things like your Dracloaks, like your Dusclops. The Latias is great because it means we can save our energies onto our Dreepies and free retreat into our Badoo, because Badoo is just such a strong card in the early game. And it also means if we start something like an Ursaluna, we have a way to get it out of active instead of having to manually attach 3 energy. We have our Ursaluna, which is a great Pokemon, because Dragapult's attack is a very awkward attack cost. It is a fire and psychic, and if you take a look, we don't have any energy acceleration. The only thing we have that is a energy acceleration would be the Neo Upper Energy. But the thing is, sometimes it is quite difficult to chain multiple Dragapults together. So for example, if we use 2 Dragapults in a game, the odds of us using a third Dragapult are close to 0, so usually we will have to use Ursaluna to close out the game onto something like a Pheasantipity or an opposing Ursaluna, or if you pair it with a Dusclops or Dusknoir, even something of higher HP like a Gardevoir or a opposing Ursaluna itself. Munkidori, like I said, is a little bit contested. I don't really like the Munkidori right now. This card can definitely be swapped out for a second jamming power. In fact, that's what I would probably change it out from this list, or you can even make this card a Dawn when that is legal, and then I think it'll be just, this is probably the best list of Dragapult right now, for me at least. Obviously, everyone has a different playstyle, so you might not like the Ray Candy, but I do really like the Ray Candy, and this is just a list I've gotten very comfortable playing with. Alright, cool. So, now let's talk about the different stages of the game. So, the early game. The early game will usually look like you setting up a Badoo in the active, multiple Dreepies, and multiple Duskulls. So usually what I would say against most matchups is you want to prioritize Badoo, because Badoo is there to slow down the deck. Dragapult is a deck that wants to take its time in the early game, draw through cards, set itself up, and make sure it is in a good position board state wise when you finally initiate the prize trade. Initiating the prize trade is very important and a lot more skillful than people would make it out to be, because for a lot of other decks like Goldengo, like Ceruledge, like any beatdown decks realistically, even Gardevoir, a lot of the times they will just start taking prize cards as fast as possible. Dragapult kind of likes to avoid that, because you love to get max value out of Lily's Determination and also Counter Catcher. These are 2 cards that don't have as great of an impact when you start taking prize cards. For example, if you go ahead in prizes, Counter Catcher is offline, so you kind of want to stay behind, and if you take any prize cards in itself, it means you're getting -2 cards from every single Lily's Determination you do play. Lily's Determination is a supporter that you will be using 90% of the time in the early game, because at the end of the game you kind of want to spam Ionos and just consistently disrupt your opponent. Dragapult itself is a very control-y kind of beat down deck in a way, where it has a lot of ways to play the game. However, you are able to control the pace of play and control like resources, because you have access to your deck through so many drawing cards and through great supporters like Hilda being able to get access to your Pokemon and your energies, and you also have just an amazing draw engine in the Dracloak, being able to see if you have 3 Dracloaks in play, which is usually the number you'll have in play, 2 to 3, you're seeing at least 6 cards every single turn, and that is just really good because you get to stack your deck. So you might be thinking, well, stacking your deck is illegal. Well, not if you do it legally, right? Dracloak, since it looks at the top 2 cards of your deck, it puts 1 into your hand and 1 to the bottom of the deck. And this is really, really important, because in the late game, when you will be spamming Ionos rather than Lily's Determination, you will understand and you will be able to keep track of the order of cards in your deck. For example, if I'm playing against something like, let's say Goldengo, and I know that in 2 turns, I will need a boss's orders, right? And I see the boss's orders off a recon directive. I can pick up my deck, I can count how many cards are there, and I can do the math in my head, how many cards am I going to draw, like, in this position. If I'm going to play Iono this turn, so I'm going to see 4 cards, I'm going to play 2 more recon directives, I'm going to see another 4 cards, and I have 12 cards in my deck, meaning guaranteed next turn, with Dracloaks, I will be able to find that boss's orders. And if they play something like an Iono, I will still be able to draw into the boss's orders. However, if I put that boss's orders into my hand now, and they Iono me and disrupt me, that boss's orders will be at the bottom of the deck and I won't be able to see it. So sometimes, even though you know this resource is really strong and you want it in the following turn, it is actually better to put it at the bottom of the deck. This obviously requires some practice and understanding of the matchups and understanding your deck and how possible it is to draw back into these things. Another way we can use Recon Directive in a really nice and resource-friendly way is by conserving things and saving things. So let's take, for example, a deck like Absolbox. Absolbox right now is playing something called Zoroark's Machinations and also Eri. and they also have a great attack on the Absol called Claw of Darkness, which looks at your hand and discards any card they see there, which is really powerful, especially when you have cards that need to be comboed with. So if you want to build up a combo, it's very difficult to build up a combo in your hand and keep it safe from something like Absol and Eri and Zoroark. So Dracloak can keep those things safe. For example, if you see your Neo Up energy and you know you aren't going to attach it that turn, it's very nice to just be able to put it at the bottom of the deck. Something like Zoroark can't do that because they have to discard a card and then they draw 2 cards. Whereas Recon Directive lets us put the card at the bottom of the deck and keep it safe from something like Claw of Darkness. And if it's items, for example, Night Treasures or Ray Candies, we can keep those safe from Ares and stuff like that. And instead we can flood our hand with cards that we know aren't as impactful, and it's better if those get discarded. And if our opponent plays an Aerie, we'll be getting rid of Buddy Poffins in the late game. And if they play Zoroark, we can still discard the Buddy Poffins and stuff that we just do not need at that point of the game. So Dracloak's Recon Directive is a much more powerful ability than it may look like. And then into the mid stages of the game, it will look a little bit similar to the so usually the mid stage of the game is kind of when you initiate the prize trade. This is like the mid stage of the game. This is now you've evolved into a Dragapult and you've decided, right, this is the turn I'm going to Phantom Dive. Dortmund just conceded a goal in the 90th plus 7th minute. I am today. Manchester United tied to Tottenham. The women's team lost to Aston Villa, and Dortmund has just tied to Hamburg SV. Anyway, Wolves plays later against Chelsea, so my depression is probably going to only get worse. Oh, what a day to be Harper, bro. What a day. Anyway, so let's focus back on Dragapult instead of football. So usually the mid game, I'll kind of like the mid to late game, I'll kind of call the Phantom Dive time, right? It's the time where you announce attacks. It's the time where you start entering attacks other than Ichipolo, which is very good. So the thing is, the mid game can also be the point, and it is by far the most important point of the game, and a lot of games are decided when you announce your first Phantom Dive. For example, let's take Gardevoir, right? If Gardevoir only has 2 Curlies in play because you've slowed them down with a Badoo, it is very easy in that position to win the game. In fact, if they have a Gardevoir and a Curlier, we can board wipe them on that turn because we can use something like a Dusk Noir into the Gardevoir, and then we can use Counter Catcher. Remember, Counter Catcher and your bombs are best friends. Usually when you play a bomb, it is going to be followed by a Counter Catcher. They are usually, that is one of your strongest combos in the deck, right? So Dusk Noir can go into the Gardevoir, you can pop your Dusclops into a Curlier, you can Counter Catcher up the Gardevoir, knock out the Gardevoir, knock out the Curlier, and a very important tip against many decks that play Monkey Dory, such as Gardevoir, such as Absolbox, such as Grimmstar, a lot of the times, instead of spreading damage like 3/3/3 or 2/2, you will put all of your damage counters into one Pokemon, even if that Pokemon only has 10 HP left. For example, if I'm targeting that Curlier, which now has 50 HP left, and means I have 1 extra damage counter, I will usually put all 6 onto that Curlier, because it means my opponent doesn't have damage to move around with Monkey Dory. And 1 damage can definitely be the meaning between life and death, right? This is a deck that shows how important 1 damage can be. Like, why do we think Hawlucha is one of the best cards in the deck when paired with Phantom Dive, right? Hawlucha in itself can be the difference from taking 0 prize cards to taking 3 prize cards. For example, if we have Boss's Orders in our hand and a Hawlucha, and our opponent has a Fezandipity and a Ralt in play, one has 210 HP, the other has 70 HP. If we use Hawlucha, we can ping them, taking away 10 HP from each, right? One will go down to 200 HP, and the other will go down to 60 HP, right? You can kind of see where I'm going with this. Then we will use the Boss's Orders into the Fezandipity, and we will Phantom Dive, knocking out the Fezandipity, and knocking out the Routes as well, putting 6 damage counters off of the Phantom Dive, and knocking them out, and taking 3 prize cards. The Hawlucha lets us go for 3/3 prize maps very, very often, and this is something that we will do very often against decks like Raging Bolt, against decks like Terra Box, against decks like Dog Box. 3/3 prize maps are very, very common. So, speaking about the matchups, let's take a quick look at those. Alright, so first up, I'm going to be talking about the matchup that I have probably played the most and have the most experience on. It is the Gardevoir matchup. If you're going to play Dragapult, you have to understand this matchup in and out. There are many things that you can do to win this matchup, but there are also many things you can do to lose this matchup. It is a very tedious matchup, and one that honestly kind of depends on the setup of your board. So the idea will always be to go second and slow them down with Badoo. Since this is an Arven-based build, meaning that they rely very heavily on items, they obviously do play Ionos and Lilies. However, their favorite supporter on that first turn will usually be something like an Arven to get a Secret Box, and Secret Box for their TM Evo, their Artisan, their Nest Balls. Some will play a one Nest Ball, one Buddy Puffin. They'll maybe get the Buddy Puffin instead, and then also they'll get a supporter for the following turn. And if you go first, if they go first, they can't play a supporter, right? Which means they don't have access to a lot of their deck, and this is like the strongest point of their deck. They play more supporters than we do, right? So if we are able to go second, and they're not able to play a supporter, and they don't have a great setup, we can slow them down very heavily by going straight into Badoo. And Badoo will slow them down because Badoo takes away their Nest Balls, it takes away their Rare Candy, meaning they can't go from routes straight into a Gardevoir, means it takes away their Ultra Balls, meaning they can't really find something like a Curlier other than naturally drawing into it, means they can't find just honestly any Pokemon. Earthen Vessel means they can't find energy, and the other thing with the Ultra Ball means they can't discard energy, meaning if they do find a Gardevoir, they just won't have energy in the bin to actually use with that Gardevoir. It means they can't use Night Stretches, so if they have discarded something earlier on with an Ultra Ball like a Courier, they will not be able to get it back, and they can't use the best part of the deck, the Secret Box, right? So Badoo takes away so much of their deck, and if you are able to pair this with a jamming tower, it is even better, because now you take away their second best option, being the TM Evolution. That was very difficult for me to say for some reason. And usually what they will do is they will go from the routes into the Curlier using the TM Evo. Sometimes if they find the Curlier, they'll evolve the Curlier and then use the TM Evo to get into a Gardevoir on that turn. So that is something that they can do, and then it's sometimes, honestly, the way that they usually get into it, and it can be very scary for Dragapult. However, just because they found the Gardevoir doesn't mean you just lose the game, because remember, even if they find the Gardevoir, they still need to find ways to get energy in their bin, and without items, it is very difficult to get that. The only way they can do that was with Mystery Garden, and that's only if they have less than cards in their hand than psychic Pokemon, and usually that's not the case. Since you are item locking them, they can't play down their hand very often, and since they're not taking prizes, they'll usually Iono themselves into 6 cards and Lily themselves into 8 cards and research themselves into 7 cards, meaning they can't get much value out of Mystery Garden. They only play 1 research as well. That's something that you have to keep in mind as well. So they can't use a lot of these items that they would usually use to discard energy in the first place. They might be able to get 1 or 2, but usually that's not going to be doing too much for them, right? They can probably use Mind Bend, they can probably use a Screamtail very early, but these are only for 80 damage, right? It is not the best case scenario for them. So how do you beat this matchup? I'm going to go over a few ways to beat this matchup, and I'm going to talk you through some games I played yesterday. I played 7 games against Gardevoir yesterday, against the best Gardevoir player in the country, and I won 4 of them, and I lost 3 of them. And before that, I played against my Japanese friend who's testing for the Vegas Regionals. We played 5 games, and I won every single one. So the matchup is definitely very, very winnable, and it usually comes in that mid-game, like I said beforehand, the most important part of the game for Dragapult. And it comes by slowing them down and making sure that they cannot find and establish a Gardevoir, right? A lot of the times the game will be won by me finding a Rare Candy and being able to build up a Dragapult on my second or third turn and just completely shutting them out of the game with Curliers, knocking out routes, right? It is very important that you understand when to initiate the Phantom Dive, because sometimes they might have something like a Curlier and a Routes and a Routes. If you can't KO all 3 of these in the same turn, do not Phantom Dive. Even though you might have Phantom Dive in your hand, do not Phantom Dive, right? It is very important that when you go for that Phantom Dive, you knock them all out in the same turn, because then it would be very easy for your opponent to now have access to Pheasantipity and also just be able to have access to all the items that they've been holding in their hand, and then go straight into their Rare Candy. If you do, however, have to go for this kind of play, if you do have to Phantom Dive at this point and not KO all of their Guardian, let's say you're killing something else, then make sure you pair it with an Iono. Whenever you stop using Badoo, do not, 90% of the time, you do not want to Phantom Dive that turn, even if you are wiping stuff, because, I mean, unless you Iono, that's the main thing. If you Iono, you're getting rid of so many cards they probably have been holding on to that they can't use, that are really powerful, like Nest Ball, like Rare Candy, like Earthen Vessel, like Ultra Ball, like Secret Box maybe, right? These are cards that they will be holding on to and that they haven't been able to use. So if you're going to announce Phantom Dive after your Badoo, try and pair it with an Iono. Obviously, sometimes it's not possible, and sometimes you don't actually have to, because if you're wiping all of their Curlies and stuff, sure, they can re-establish the board, but they won't have any response in the following turn. And then you can just do the exact same thing over again. So Ways that they can play around this is by pre-benching the Clefairy and manual attaching to the Clefairy. This is something that they can do, and this is honestly perfectly fine, because what we can do is, since we will take some time to build up our Dragapult and keep our Neo Upper Energy in play, then what we can, let's say, board wipe 2 of their Curliers, then they'll go Clefairy, knock out our Dragapult, and from this position, it'll be quite easy for us to win the game anyway, because we'll probably have access to a second Dragapult, be able to knock out this Clefairy, and then knock out something like a Ralts that they've re-established using Hawlucha, and then from there, we'll be on a single prize card remaining, and this prize card is very easy to take with something like an Ursaluna at the end of the game. Make sure you don't greed straight away, like in that next turn, to take the prize card. However, you usually will, because they're probably not going to have a way to set up a Gardevoir after you do that again. So try and make sure you are able to set yourself in a board state where you're able to board wipe them multiple times. So for example, let's say you have Dusclops in play and you have Hawlucha in hand. Let's say on that first turn you have Boss's Orders as well, and you have Dragapult in play. All of these scenarios require Dragapult in play with energy allowed to Phantom Dive. If you have Dragapult in play with energy and you are able to announce Phantom Dive, if they have 2 routes in play, you want to use Hawlucha first, ping both the routes, boss up the one route, KO both routes, bam. It means you save your Dusclops for a following turn, meaning you will be able to go for a very similar play, honestly, just with the Dusclops. It means now you can pop the Dusclops into a route, Boss's Orders, the other Curlier or whatever, kill the Curlier, kill the route, and just keep board wiping like that. So it is very important to re-establish multiple Duskulls. Any stage 2 matchup, it is important to establish multiple Duskulls. However, it is also very board state dependent, because against decks like Grimmstyle and against decks like Dragapult ourselves, it is possible for them to just get rid of our Duskulls, right? Since they have 60 HP, Dragapult can just boss up a Duskull or counter catch up a Duskull and then put 60 damage counters on the bench Duskull, right? And that's a free 2 prize cards. And we do not want to be giving up free 2 prize cards to Dragapult like that. So make sure you understand when it's possible for your opponent on the following turn to get rid of both of your Duskulls. And if it is like that, then maybe it is better to not bench the Duskulls. However, sometimes it is better to bench the Duskulls and bait them into attacking that and not attacking into something like your Dragapult, or you just make the game very uncomfortable for them, because Dragapult doesn't have a great way to deal with Dragapult itself. You have to 2-shot the Dragapult unless you're using Dusknoir. So if they have their own, if they don't even have a Dusclops established and now they're targeting down your Dusclops, that's fine, because you're going to be the first one swinging into their Dragapult usually, and then taking a prize card on the bench, like Routes or something like that. And if that's the case, then you will be able to knock out their Dragapult before they knock out your Dragapult. They might be able to play something like a Toro, but since that discards the energy and Dragapult is very difficult to attack with and attach with energy, it is very possible for them to run out of energy and not be able to establish a Dragapult even if they do Turo. Sometimes they might pivot into a Ursaluna, so it's just very important to keep an eye out on the board state, on the resources, and also on the prize cards. It is a very, it's a deck that is fairly reactive in the situation, in the things you do. The only time that's very oppressive is in the early game with the Badoo and being able to announce Phantom Knife straight away. However, against decks like the stage 2 decks in the later stage of the game, once you've already established, then it becomes a little bit more like chess and a little bit more reactive, and it isn't just a set game plan. Alright, if they do set up the Gardevoir, let's say, then usually you will probably be going for something like a 2-2-2 prize map, right? You will probably be going Phantom Dive and KOing something like a Monkey Dory and a benched Routes. They'll probably return KO with a Clefairy or something. They'll have to put Clefairy into play to get rid of that. They'll also probably be putting something like a Fezandipity into play, right? And if they put Fez and Clefairy into play, that is really good for you. But let's say they don't put the Fezandipity into play and they instead attack with Gardevoir. What you can do here is you can go Dusknoir into the Gardevoir, knock out the Gardevoir, and then on the following turn go Ursaluna, KO the Clefairy. They will have to leave the Clefairy in play if they want to one-shot your Dragapult. And if they don't leave the Clefairy in play and one-shot your Dragapult using something like a Drifloon plus Bravery Charm, then usually what you can do is just still use Ursaluna, but you'll just use the Jamming Tower to turn off the Bravery Charm, knocking out the Drifloon, and then being able to gust up something else that is worth 1 prize card and taking a knockout there. So that is usually how the matchup goes, and since you usually do take prize cards a little bit earlier than them at times, especially if you have a decent setup, then they'll be benching Fezandipity, and if they have a better setup than you and start getting into Gardevoir before you're able to attack, honestly, the matchup gets really difficult in that scenario, and then it's very, much so reactive, and you kind of have to sometimes try and trap stuff in the active, you might have to boss up a Gardevoir if they don't have extra energy in the bench and just use Badoo and try and trap that Gardevoir in active for a turn or two, and then announce Phantom Dives once you're able to re-establish your board state with the Dusclops and the Dusknoirs. Alright, that is Gardevoir for now. We are halfway through the video, I think. We're like half an hour into the video. If you guys are still watching, smash like, smash subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And leave a comment, right? Leave a comment if you guys like this kind of content and what kind of decks you'd like me to see me cover next. All right, the next matchup is a matchup that can definitely be quite sketchy, especially because now Goldengo is a deck that does have a really nice early game with the Zoroark and the Lunatone engine. Not only that, they have cards that are able to counter Phantom Dive damage, such as the Picnic Basket and the Professor Toro scenario. Usually how you would play this matchup would be going Phantom Dive 200 into Goldengo and 60 into a bench Goldengo, and then next turn you would Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher and get rid of both of the Goldengos like that. This is still a play that you can make. I'm not saying this is a play that is completely forbidden and it's bad. It is a play that you can make. However, now it is a little bit more difficult to do that. So usually what you will do is you can target down the Zoroark and Lunatone engine using something like a Dusclops into a Zoroark for 50 damage, or it's usually be the Lunatone for 50 damage because the Zoroark will be inactive, and then from there you can go Phantom Dive, knock out the Zoroark, knock out the Lunatone, trading 2 prize cards for the 1 prize card there. The 1 prize card there doesn't really do too much unless you want to use a bomb in the later stage of the game, which sometimes you will have to, because of Ursaluna being able to knock out a Goldengo. So getting rid of the Zoroark and the Lunatone is very important, as this is a very big part of their draw engine and a very big part of their like energy discarding. So that is a very important part of the deck, because if we remember the older Goldengos, they would play eSearch Pro, and that is how they would find all of their energy, and they would be able to just go straight from there. However, this deck has to manually find the energy and collect it in their hand. So in the early game, if you're able to Badoo and they don't set up their Zoroark or Lunatone, they don't have them on that first turn, there's a very good chance you're going to win that game, because it turns off so much of their deck. It means it turns off their fighting gongs, meaning they can't find energy, the fighting energy, and their Zoroark Lunatone. It turns off their earthen vessels, meaning they can't find energy. It means it turns off their nest balls, which means they can't find Genesect, which is Genesect is the only way that they can actually find Goldengo other than their single copy of Brock Scouting. And if they find a single copy of Brock Scouting, then good for them, right? It turns off their Buddy Puffins, meaning they can't set up multiple Gimme Ghouls, and that's just something that is very important. This is still a matchup that the board wipe is very possible thanks to the Rare Candies. Rare Candies are what makes this matchup honestly not that bad. Usually you want to go second, 100% you want to go second, force them to hopefully not be able to find as many things as possible, because if they're able to establish multiple Gimme Ghouls, Zoroark, Lunatone, and Genesect, the matchup is very, very difficult. However, if you're able to limit them and they only find like a Gimme Ghoul and a Zoroark and a Lunatone, let's say, and they attack on the next turn, but they can't attack on that first turn, obviously, then you will go straight into Badoo. You will Badoo hoping they can't find their Genesect, and you'll start building up your Dragapults. And your Dragapults will definitely be always targeting down the Gimme Ghouls, because if they only have 2 Gimme Ghouls in play, you can go Holucha Ping a Gimme Ghoul, knock out a Gimme Ghoul on active and bench, or Dusclops, knock out Gimme Ghoul on bench and the active. It doesn't, at that point, if you get a Dragapult in play, it doesn't really matter about the Zoroark. You can let them just keep poking at your Dragapult or let them take 1 prize every turn. But as long as you keep targeting down with their Gimme Ghouls, you will be perfectly fine. Because this deck does not have great recovery. They do have Lana's Aid, which can put 3 in any combination of Pokemon and energy. But the thing is, they only play 1 copy of that, and it is not findable other than drawing into it itself. So they don't really have anything like Arven for Night Stretcher right now. Some of them will play Night Stretcher and they'll be able to re-establish Gimme Ghouls. However, they usually only play 1 Night Stretcher and at most 2. Usually it'll be 1 though. And from there, if they don't have a Goldengo set up and you're just constantly pummeling them with Phantom Dives and not letting them establish Goldengo, you will win the game. They also have to, 90% of the time, they have to bench the Genesect and to find their Goldengos. And this is why they play Double Toro, because they never want to have Genesect and Serendipity as a liability. They'll only put it down, they'll use Genesect and pick it back up. However, sometimes it is perfectly fine for you to pop a Dusclops into a Genesect 50 and take the knockout there. But usually what you want to do is try and force them to have to use other things, like a Boss's Orders or like an Arven, and not use the Toro, because then what you want to do is you kind of want to save the Genesect a little bit for later. So something that you can do would be use the Holucha Ping, 10 onto a Genesect, 10 onto a Lunatone, putting it down to 50 HP. You will use your Dusclops into the Lunatone, putting it down to sorry, it'll be putting it down to 100 HP, then Dusclops will put it down to 50 HP, then you will go Phantom Dive, knocking out a Zoroark, knocking out a Lunatone, and putting 10 damage onto the Genesect, putting it down to 200 HP, meaning on the following turn, you can kill the Genesect if they don't Tera it up. And usually, it's very difficult for them to commit their support of a turn to Turo up a Genesect that only has 2 damage counters on it, even though they know exactly what's going to happen on the following turn, because usually they will be prioritizing something like an Arven, depending on how much draw they have, to try and knock you out. Because if they whiff the knockout and Turo up the Genesect, you don't mind, right? You really don't mind that, because it means you've got an extra free turn to just go Phantom Dive into Goldengo and maybe kill a Gimmighoul or put more damage on a different Goldengo as well, and then from there it's just very easy to steamroll the game. If they ever whiff a knockout, usually you'll be winning the game, and sometimes they do whiff attacks, because like I said, it is not easy for them to find energy. The only way they can find energy is with Fighting Gong and Earthen Vessel, and these are both items which are stopped in the early game thanks to Badoo, and they can Lunar Cycle energy away into the discard pile and then use Superior Energy Retrieval at the end of the game. If they do have a pretty strong setup, however, what you'll have to do at the end of the game is Iono them to a very low card count, slap down the Jamming Tower, boss up or counter catcher up a Goldengo, or just swing into a Goldengo and hope that they don't have it on the next turn, and then you'll be able to go Boss's Orders or counter catcher up the other Goldengo and take 4 prize cards in that same turn. If they have the Genesect in play, you definitely want to counter catcher up the Genesect with Jamming Tower, because obviously it has a 2 retreat cost and it doesn't draw cards while inactive, so it is a much better target to just swing 200 into and put 60 damage onto the Goldengo, meaning on the following turn you can knock out the Goldengo, knock out the Genesect, and you still have 4 damage counters to play with. If you haven't won the game by then, you can put, let's say, 2 damage on one Goldengo and 2 damage on another, meaning on that following turn you'll be able to use Ursaluna to knock out either of those Goldengos, right? You do have to worry about the picnic basket, but if you are able to kind of pull that off, it's very difficult for them to find these things with a very low card count. If they use Arven, usually they'll be using Arven for a Superior Energy Retrieval to knock out your active, instead of going Picnic Basket to whiff a knocked out but heal 20 damage off their Pokemon, right? So that is something that you have to keep in mind. Also, Pheasantipity is a great card for them, and they sometimes do have to put it in play to try and avoid these kinds of turns, and in that case it is quite important to probably gust up and kill the Pheasantipity, or even gust up the Pheasantipity. You don't kill it, you just put 200 damage on it, meaning they have to find an energy and retreat into it. They don't have access to flip the script, and it means on the following turn you'll be able to just Hawlucha KO this and KO something else. Let's say you put like 40 damage or 50 damage or even just 60 damage onto a Goldengo. Next turn you can go Hawlucha, KO that, and then Ursaluna, KO the Goldengo, and you don't even need a Dragapult in play, and on top of that, Picnic Basket doesn't just win the game for them, right? So that is basically this matchup. Badoo very strong, slow them down as much as possible, force them to put down Genesect, and just make the game very awkward for them, target down the Gimmighouls, and if the game is looking like a fairly standard Goldengo game, putting 50 damage onto the Lunatone and killing the Zoroark paired with an Iono is very strong, because it means that they don't have as much draw power, since they are committing bench spots to Zoroarks, 2 Lunatones, 2 Genesects. They will only have like 2 or 3 Gimmighouls in play, and at that point they'll probably only have 2 Goldengos in play, meaning they can at max with an Air Balloon draw 4 cards on the following turn, and 4 cards is not a lot of cards for Goldengo to be drawing, so make sure you target their drawing. Next up we have Dragapult. We'll be looking at the mirror, and I'll be looking at a deck list that is in, let's say, the second place deck list. So this is a matchup that is very technical. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this matchup, and it is definitely not very easy. Since we are playing the Rare Candy build, we are a little bit less favored in this matchup in the early game, right? It just means we have more dead cards than they do, because we're playing 3 Rare Candies, and usually you will be Badooing. Sometimes people might not know that you are playing the Rare Candy build, and you can catch them off guard at the later stages of the game, being able to go out of nowhere from a Dreepy into a Dragapult, even though they think they are safe. So this matchup can be sketchy, because it is a mirror match, and mirror matches are usually sketchy. So usually you still, just like every other matchup, you want to force them to go second, you want to item lock them and hope that they whiff stuff. However, Dragapult is a deck that is very good at functioning under item lock because of Dracloaks, because of very heavy supporter lines, and the only items you ever really play are your ball searches. But the thing is, you play other Pokemon search, such as the Hilda, such as the Dawn, such as the Brock, such as the Jacques. Those are just, really good cards that Dragapult does play. Jacques is probably the least common one right now, but it is in this list I'm looking at right now. So it is still played, and this was the highest placing list from the Brisbane Regionals. So item lock doesn't hurt you as much, but it definitely can still hurt you. You definitely want to establish as many Dracloaks as possible and just constantly draw cards. You want to establish your Duskulls and your Dusclops, and announcing Phantom Dive is very important in this matchup. Like every other matchup, obviously, but it's when you do it. You definitely want to target down their lines. Like, for example, if you want to Phantom Dive, you want to KO like both of their Dracloaks or both of their like Dusclops plus Duskull, and make sure that you force them to play straight Dragapult instead of regular Dragapult, right? And at that point, if you're able to get rid of their Dusclops and Dusknoir, then they will have to respond by going into Dragapult themselves, right? And they'll probably they'll respond by targeting down your Dusknoir line. But usually what you can do is you can just use your Dusknoir line before they're able to target it down and have the damage on their board state, right? You can one-shot their Dragapults by using Dusknoir 130 and then Phantom Dive into their Dragapult, if that is ever an option. And since they don't play Rare Candy, if you can continuously knock out the Dracloaks and not let them get into a Dragapult, it's impossible for them to ever find themselves in a situation where they're able to get Dragapult out because they don't play Rare Candy, right? And since you do, if they target down your Dracloak line, you can kind of take them by surprise and go, all right, I'll go Hilda for Dragapult and Neo Arbor Energy. I'll attach Neo Arbor Energy and I'll Rare Candy your Dragapult, and then you can go Phantom Dive into their Dragapult. And the thing is, if they do target down your Dracloak line, that means they're probably leaving your Dusknoir and Dusclops line active because they think it doesn't really matter because you only have a Dreep in play. And then you can use something like a Dusknoir into their Dragapult. You can use a Dusclops into their bench Dracloak. You can go Iono probably like to 1 or 2, and then go Phantom Dive, knock out their Dragapult, knock out their Dracloak, make sure they don't have a draw engine, and from there it is very difficult for them to respond and take that last prize card. This is a matchup that can be won regardless of where you are, as long as you still have a way to Phantom Dive, to disrupt, and make sure you can get rid of their draw engine and also the Dusclops. So usually you will be targeting down one or the other. You're not usually going to be going for both, and it's very important to identify at that point which is more important. If they've already used their Neo Upper Ace spec, even though they have a Dracloak in play, if it doesn't have an energy, usually these guys will be more of a threat because they have to manually attach to the Dracloak before they are able to actually Phantom Dive you, and it means just on that following turn, you will still be, even if they do evolve into a Dragapult, you will get the first hit and swing into that Dragapult, and they can't Tera up that Dragapult because they don't have other energy, right? They don't have energy to play around with. They can't Monkey Dory damage off that Dragapult because they have to attach the Dragapult to Phantom Dive with as well, and at that point, they will probably also be benching something like a Fessantipity. Most Dragapult decks are playing Professor Tera scenario, so remember that you can get use of Fessantipity in matchups that you don't want to put it down by putting it down, using it, and picking it back up with the Tera scenario, right? So this is a way you can get value out of that. Badoo is also a very easy, prize card, but you don't want to knock it out in the beginning of the game. Some people just see prize cards and they try and take prize cards as much as often. Leaving Badoo is great for a few reasons. One, it is a very easy prize card at the end of the game, and two would be, it means they have less bench space. It means they can't bench more Dreepies, they can't bench more Duskulls. Hawlucha won't feel as good if they don't have any bench space. Monkey Dory won't feel as good if they don't have as much bench space, right? So it is a very easy prize card at the end of the game, and it just means it limits their options in that mid to late stage of the game by forcing them to have Badoo in play. And that is something that has won me quite a few games as well. In fact, the Rare Candies have won me the mirror match a lot because I'll have a slower start than them because they have a more consistent version of the list than me in the beginning of the game. However, not playing Rare Candies does sacrifice a lot of your other matchups. Like your Gardevoir matchup becomes a lot worse without the Rare Candy. Your beatdown matchups such as your Goldengo, your Raging Bolt, your Ceruledge matchups become a lot worse without Rare Candy. So I'm willing to sacrifice the mirror match a little bit, which is still winnable, very winnable. You just have to kind of outplay your opponent as well. And then it is very possible because they'll think they're in a good position and you'll be able to go Rare Candy out of nowhere into a Dragapult, Rare Candy out of nowhere into a Dusknoir, kill this a single Dragapult that has energy on it, and from there just steamroll them because they don't actually have an answer to that, and they didn't think, and they didn't establish a board that they thought that would have like let you set up a Dragapult. They never thought about that, so they didn't prepare for that, right? Always make sure that you respect your opponent, and let's say just think that they might have a like rare candy, so just play in a way that you are able to like avoid that kind of playstyle. However, just do remember that there is a line that you can take even if Dragapult is not an option. You are able to win games if they continuously target your Cloak, and that is using your Dusk Noir line and your Ursaluna. Ursaluna plus Dusk Noir can one-shot a Dragapult, obviously, and since we have Turo, we can use Ursaluna multiple turns in a row. We can use the Ursaluna, we can then Turo, bench our Latias, free retreat out of the Ursaluna, and just continuously use the Ursaluna again and again and again. So don't think that that game is completely over, and usually they will give you, let's say, 2 prize cards in that beginning of the game with the Dusclops when they target down your Dracloak and Dreepies. So it means you have to pop 2 Dusk Noirs yourself, or a Dusclops and Dusk Noir yourself with an Ursaluna, and you will attack into that. And usually you'll be able to kill a Dragapult and then a Fezandipiti or a Latias in the later stages of the game. So the matchup is a little bit weird, and not one that I have the most experience into because not many people around my parts play Dragapult as much as I do, and for some reason I keep dodging the mirror match. So yeah, that is the Dragapult matchup here. Alright, I'm just going to quickly touch on Marnie's Grimmsnarl, the matchup here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this matchup is very similar to the Gardevoir matchup in the sense that you kind of want to target down the Marnie's Grimmsnarl line, because without that, their deck just can't do as much. You want to save your Turo because they do play your Yveltal, and you want to make sure that stuff isn't trapped. For example, if they remember, if they just trap something like a Dreepy, you can evolve that into a Dracloak to retreat it. If they trap a Dracloak, you can evolve that into a Dragapult and retreat it. If they trap a Dragapult, what are they doing trapping a Dragapult, right? So Impidimps and Morgrams are very easy to target down with stuff like your Holucha. Morgrams are easy to target down with stuff like your Dusclops and Dusk Noir, and just being able to board wipe them, killing a Grimmsnarl with a Dusk Noir and killing a Morgram or a Impidimp with either your Bombs or your Holucha is a great play, right? Another thing is what you can do is you can target down and KO the Frostlass and the Snorunt at the same time, because it's very difficult for them to function without them, right? They have multiple Monkey-Dories, but they can't use Monkey-Dories if they don't have any damage in play. And you can always make sure that you don't leave damage in play by popping something like a Dusclops into a Monkey-Dory, KO a Morgram, and then put 60 damage onto the Monkey-Dory to KO the Monkey-Dory as well. And even if they have multiple Monkey-Dories in play, they now still no longer have any damage. You want to make sure you avoid swinging into the Grimmsnarl and leaving damage in play if they do have Monkey-Dories set up, because obviously, you know, that is just a death sentence, because they are able to target down something like double Dracloak on the following turn, being able to use Monkey-Dory and Shadow Bullet the 30 damage that swings from there. They can KO a lot of stuff. So this is something that you definitely want to avoid, and just target down the lines, the Grimmsnarl lines. You can usually go for a 2-2-2 prize map in this deck as well, by saving your bombs, KOing Grimmsnarl when that comes out with Dusk Noir, targeting down Snorunts and Monkey-Dories, or just double Monkey-Dory with the 50 from the Dusclops and the Holucha, even from the Impidimps. You can like boss up Monkey-Dory, Holucha, Impidimp, KO. They'll try and trap your Holucha, and you can Turo it back up or just let it die, to be honest, whichever one is easier. And they'll usually try go for an Ursaluna at the end of the game. This is a matchup that you definitely don't want to be benching Fezandipiti, and you don't want to be benching the Latias, because obviously they take damage, and Latias is able to be one-shot by Grimmsnarl because of the weakness, and Fezandipiti is basically able to be one-shot by Grimmsnarl because if they have Frostlass in play, it's taking 10 damage, means it's on 190 HP, so it'll have 10 HP. So if they have any Monkey-Dory, like a single Monkey-Dory tick, they can just KO the Fezandipiti, which is very easy, and usually they will have it. So avoid benching those, and just kind of make sure it's very difficult for them to take prize cards. So something that you might find yourself doing in this kind of a matchup is evolving your Dracloaks into your Dragapults a little bit earlier than you would have liked to, or leaving them as Dreepies so they don't tick damage from the Frostlass, so that you can play around the de-evolution kind of thing. So it is very easy to lose the game if you aren't thinking about the de-evolution, so just keep that in mind as well. Another matchup we can take a quick look at would be the Zoroark matchup. So Zoroark is a bit of a difficult and a bit of an interesting matchup for Dragapult, and that is all because of the powerful Rage attack on End's Reshiram, meaning if we ever swing Phantom Dive 200 into End's Zoroark, they can just one-shot us right back. However, sometimes that is perfectly okay. If we are in a board state where we have established multiple like energy on Dracloaks and stuff, then it is perfectly fine for us to just swing 200 damage into a Zoroark and just let them one-shot us back, because it means we will have a knockout on the following turn, and sometimes we'll have more than one. We'll be able to maybe target down something like a Pheasantipede or a different Zoroark in itself, use Dusk Noir, kill that Zoroark and the Zoroark that we did damage to earlier on in the game. So this is a matchup that can be very scary. However, I think this is also a very fun matchup. It's probably the most fun matchup in the game because it's a very technical matchup from both sides. I would say there's a great way. I wish I could tell you there's a great way to play this matchup. However, this matchup is very board state dependent, and just basically the main tip I would give you would be target down their Reshirams and stuff and Monkeydoris, and just never leave damage on their board for them to use their for them to use their Adrenabrains and stuff. You do have to make sure to play around the subjugating chains. Something that they can do is attach energy to Pekrunt at the end of the game, and if they have damage in play with Monkeydory, they can then ping your Dragapult for 30 or even just 20, and then use Irritating Outburst for 300 damage if you're on one prize card left, and one-shot your Dragapult. That is the only way they can one-shot your Dragapult without powerful Rage. Turo is honestly a really good card in this matchup sometimes because they will try and set up multiple KOs using Clutch. And Pekrunt, because Pekrunt can poison their own Yveltal, means it'll take damage into every turn, means every turn they will have a free 2 damage to move with a Monkeydory. Usually what you want to do is, like I said, target down their one prize Pokemon and chase stuff like that, and just go for a 2 prize map. And you might think, how is this possible? Well, it's possible because you can, let's say, target down a Monkeydory in the early game and kill a Zoroark with a Horlucha ping. That's your first 2 prize cards. Then you can use a Dusk Noir into a Zoroark and take another 2 prize cards, and just making sure that they are forced to 2-shot you all the time. For example, Dusk Noir is a really great card in this matchup because even though it is giving them a prize card, it doesn't actually matter because they have no good response on the following turn. They cannot kill your Dragapult, means you will guaranteed get another Phantom Dive out of that. And if you're able to get 2 Phantom Dives out of a single Dragapult, it doesn't matter, right? Let's say you go Phantom Dive with Dusk Noir on the first Zoroark, you KO it, right? On the following turn, they will go 170 with Virtuous Flame into your Dragapult. Now your Dragapult has 150 HP left. You can swing into Zoroark as much as you want, and it won't matter because Powerful Rage is going to one-shot you regardless, right? Because they would only have to use Virtuous Flame to one-shot you. So it doesn't actually matter if you were going to be one-shot regardless, as long as you don't evolve a benched Dragapult there and leave them an easy target, because now what they can do is boss up the bench Dragapult, Powerful Rage, KO that one, and your only Dragapult in play is one that has damage on it already and will be killed next turn regardless. So just make sure you don't evolve into a second Dragapult. Usually you won't be doing that anyway. There's no reason for you to be doing that because you want to keep your draw power. Monkeydory is pretty good in this matchup as well, because if they do ever try to do that whole one-shot kind of thing, they can whiff. I mean, the 2-shot kind of thing, they can whiff very easily because they'll do 170 damage to you. If you move 30 damage and you're able to kill something like a Reshiram and a Zorua in the same turn, and you use Monkeydory to heal 30 damage, that means you go down to 140 damage on that Pokemon. If they next turn swing with Virtuous Flame, they're doing another 170, that whiffs by 10 damage, right? They are only going to be able to do 310 damage to you. A lot of these decks are playing Hero's Cape. We don't care. We have Jamming Tower. They don't have an A-spec for us, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And don't worry about the A-spec sometimes as well, because what you can do is you can swing into a Zoroark, and even if it is going to die, if it's not going to die, because the Hero's Cape, then you can, Jamming Tower out of nowhere, Hero's Cape, or let's say you swing twice into a Zoroark, then on the next turn you can just Jamming Tower, the Zoroark dies because, mid-turn, and then you can kill something else on that turn as well. So that's something that you can do as well. And yeah, Hooper doesn't really matter in this matchup, but yeah, that's basically it. This matchup is very fun, very board state dependent, but also very, very, very winnable. In fact, the more I talk about it, I think this matchup is perfectly fine. So another matchup will be Tera Box. So Tera Box is a matchup that has been coming up more and more often. And I think this matchup is perfectly fine, right? Just like most Tera matchups, you are able to take a 3-3 prize map very consistently. And since we are playing Rare Candy, Water Ogerpon, we do not fear the Razor that guards our heals, because he is not much of a threat anymore, because all we need is a single Dreepy in play with a Hilda and Rare Candy. And once we're able to set up a Dragapult, game is on. Right, game is definitely on, because usually what we will be doing is we'll, let's say, Badoo into the Water Ogerpon for 10 damage. On the following turn, we can ping a Hawlucha onto 2 Hoothoots, or Fan. Usually we'll do Fan Rotom, sorry. 100% ping the Fan Rotom and the Hoothoot, because the Fan Rotom has less permanence than a Hoothoot, because a Hoothoot can evolve into more permanence than a Hoothoot, because a Hoothoot can evolve into a Noctowl, and if it evolves into a Noctowl, it's no longer 60 HP left. So you'll ping a Hoothoot, you'll ping a Fan Rotom, you'll kill the Wellspring Ogerpon, and you will kill the Hoothoot, taking 3 prize cards on the following turn. If they go Clefairy, you're going to go second Dragapult, kill Clefairy, kill Fan Rotom, GG, sign the slip, move on with life. This matchup is very, very simple. It is 90% of the time a 3-3. If you're going to go for a 2-2, usually what you'll be doing is targeting the 2-2 Hoothoot. You'll KO 2 Hootoots, forcing them to not be able to use Knockdown the following turn. Then you'll KO a different 2 Prizer, and you'll close out the game with Ursaluna. Things you have to worry about in this matchup is the Mew EX Clefairy combo. What they can do is copy Phantom Dive. It is not the easiest thing to do, because usually they'll have to commit double Noctowl to it, because they never really want to pre-bench something like a Clefairy and a Mew, because it is very easy prize cards for you. That's something that most good Tera Box players won't do, and it's like, I still don't know if it's correct or not, because it's definitely not correct to bench them at the same time, because it's very easy then to just go like Dusk Noir 130 and KO, right? That's something else that you can do. You can just take 4 prizes in one turn with Dragapult and then Ursaluna at the end of the game. So now your prize map is looking more like a 4-2, because let's say you ping 10 damage into a Wellspring Ogerpon, then what you can, like with a Badoo in the early game, then you can go pop Dusclops onto a Liz Clefairy or a Mew EX, and then from there you can kill the active Wellspring, kill either of these guys on the bench, and then you just basically win the game on the next turn, because you have Ursaluna, right? If they ever go for a Mega Absol, which they probably won't, you can just kill it with a Dusk Noir, Dragapult, or Dusclops Ursaluna combo to knock out the Mega Absol and take 3 prize cards, making your 3-3 prize map a lot easier. Means you can just go straight up Dragapult, KO Wellspring Ogerpon and a Hoothoot or Fan Rotom in the early game and mid game, and in the late game you can just go Dusclops 50 into an Absol, Ursaluna, kill Absol, GG, right? So matchup is very winnable. I'd say it's one of the easier matchups. If you're playing Rare Candy, if you're not playing Rare Candy, it's very easy to be gate kept out of a Dragapult, but yeah. Then next up on the list will be Flareon. Flareon is very similar to the Dragapult, sorry, not the Dragapult, to the Tera Box matchup. In fact, it is one of the easier matchups as well. Emma Hagen herself said that this is the matchup that she fears the most when playing EVBox. Dragapult is just a terrible, not a terrible, but a scary matchup. Because obviously you aren't playing the Clefairy in this list anymore, because it doesn't give as much value as it should. The only way to one-shot Dragapult is using Flareon plus Black Belt's training, so just keep that in mind. That is the only way for them to go for that knockout. And then the reason this matchup is not great for them is because they can't set up their Pidgeot. The only reason Dogbox is as good as it is right now is because of Pidgeot, right? And if you're able to shut down their Pidgeot by gatekeeping them out of their Rare Candy, because that's their only way to get into the Pidgeot, it is very easy to go for the 3-3 prize map as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And this is a matchup that you can come back. Trust me, I have come back from insane situations from this matchup. All right, I am losing my voice and I'm getting a major headache right now. I'm going to end this video there. There's more I can touch upon, so I might release a part 2. If you guys want a part 2, smash like. If this gets 300 likes, I will release a part 2 with whatever matchups you guys want as well. I might have missed a few. I think I did. I think there was one I skipped that I really wanted to go over, and I think it was the Absol box, right? That matchup isn't great, but yeah. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate the support and love, and I'll be seeing you guys soon. If you guys are playing at Vegas, good luck. I hope you guys do well. Represent the Pults. Good luck, Pult gang.